Sticking with US politics, we're joined now in the studio by Labour's Shadow International Trade Secretary, Emily Thornberry. Thank you very much for being with us. We just heard Sajid Javid there talking about Donald Trump damaging democracy, about the fragility of democracy. What's your reaction to the fact that the current president doesn't seem to be accepting the result of the election?
I don't think anybody can be surprised. I think that it's very much the sort of pattern of behaviour that he indulges in. And actually, he's told us himself, hasn't he, for some time that this is what he's going to do. I think what's important is that we all stand united, those of us that are interested in democracy and supporters of Western democracy in particular. This is the biggest democracy in the West. And to have the sitting president saying that the result isn't valid is very damaging indeed. And so I think it's very important we all speak with one voice on this. And we're quite clear that there has been an election, there has been a huge turnout, that all the votes have been counted, and President Biden is President Biden.
You, of course, haven't exactly held back with your remarks about Donald Trump in the past. You've described him as racist, as a sexual predator. You said he should be treated like a bully. I mean, it's not the most diplomatic.
An asteroid of awfulness, I think, which was turned into a cartoon in the United States. Yes. Well, that's what he is. And I have personally always thought that the government had a choice when he was elected. They could have spent their time holding his hand and sucking up to him and hoping to get some crumbs from the table. And how has that worked? We have got nothing from that. You know, we haven't got, I mean, they're still putting tariffs on whiskey, because of a long-standing dispute on aircraft. We're supposed to be doing a trade deal, and yet we can't even get these punitive tariffs off. We can't even get the killer of poor Harry Dunn, back to Britain in order to face our justice. All of these things, the Prime Minister has gone personally to his good friend, Donald Trump, and asked for these things.
Why do you think he's a good friend? And why do you think the government sucked up to him?
Well, I think they thought... I think they thought...
Genuinely, what is the evidence for that?
What, that they sucked up to him?
That they were good friends?
Well, they held his hand. The Prime Minister held his hand on a number of occasions, previous Prime Minister. We've seen the way in which they have never criticised. They have never said that they disagreed with him, even during the election itself. We've heard them being mealy-mouthed and not standing up.
But isn't that it's a democratic election, isn't it?
Yes.
You wouldn't expect people to be criticising a candidate while a democratic election is going on with one of our most important allies. Also, if you look at, for example, in policy terms, there's quite a lot of clear water between Boris Johnson and Donald Trump, isn't there, on things like trade, on things like Iran, on things like climate change? OK, so where do you want me to start? So let's start with, yes, I understand during an election, it would be wrong for foreign powers to be intervening, for heaven's sake. But once the election has finished, and once the votes are being counted, and you have the President of the United States saying that the vote is not legitimate, then I think that our Prime Minister should have stood up, along with the German Foreign Minister, along with the Irish Prime Minister, I mean, all kinds of international figures, and said, this is not the behaviour that we expect. This is wrong. So I think that's that. I think that of course, there are some policy differences between Britain and the United States, and thankfully now we are going to have a president who will be more in line with our policies and with what we think is the right way of behaving. But there has been a general approach, a populist approach from Boris Johnson, which I think he has had in common with Donald Trump. And that is why they have had such a close friendship. That's why they have been so mutually congratulatory, and it'll be very difficult, I think. It's not impossible, but it'll be very difficult to move from that to being close to Joe Biden. I understand that. Do you think that, obviously, there are many valid criticisms that people make about Donald Trump, but at the same time, he has, when you look at international affairs, he's reset the relationship with China, he's tried to make approaches to North Korea. He's also, of course, not started any wars, like some other US presidents that you could think of. Has he really been so bad?
I think that he has been a disruptor. I think that, for example, on North Korea, what does he do? He marches in there. He says he's going to sort things out. He brings us to the edge of war. Do you remember how anxious we all were as to what on earth was going to happen next? And then he pulls back and thinks that it can all be done by way of a friendship, and yet nothing has been achieved. And look at the amount of time that we've wasted, and what have the North Koreans been doing in the meantime? We have seen the way in which he withdrew support from the Kurds, who were, working with the West. and just basically left them to their fate. He has been a disruptor. He has undermined international institutions. Look what he's done to the WHO. Look at the fact that we keep talking about the World Trade Organization. The World Trade Organization doesn't have a court that properly works because the appeal court doesn't have enough judges, because Donald Trump keeps saying he's not prepared to have the judges whose names are put forward. So we don't have an appeal court in the WTO. So the Conservatives say, oh, it's fine, we can go into a world run by the World Trade Organization, and yet the World Trade Organization is fundamentally dysfunctional because of the behaviour of Donald Trump, amongst other things. No, he has not been a good thing for the international world rules-based order, and now we have with Joe Biden somebody who does understand that we need to work together. It is not a question of America first, it's a question of the world first, and the only way that's going to work is if we work together.
You are clearly much happier with the idea of a Biden presidency than a Trump presidency. I don't think that would surprise anybody. No. But I just wonder, with your shadow international trade secretary hat on, are you concerned that actually Joe Biden is going to be tougher to do a trade deal with post-Brexit than Donald Trump, who said that because of the special relationship, Britain would be at the front of the queue?
So I think that what we have to do is we have to kind of unpick this a little bit, because Donald Trump and Boris Johnson may have been talking about a trade deal, but there have been all kinds of problems in reality with trying to get a trade deal together. So if we talk about, agriculture, then when we have looked at it, we have realised that we haven't wanted to have agricultural products come into Britain that are produced in a completely different way.
But do you think Joe Biden will be easier?
No, all I'm saying is that the reality is that actually getting an all-singing, all-dancing trade deal is something that takes many years and is quite complex and quite difficult to put together. I think that the right approach would be for us to say, yes, of course we want to increase trade. And one of the things that we now have in common with the new president is our commitment to climate change. Mm-hmm. Now, we should be working with them in order to be able to tackle climate change together. And actually, there are all sorts of opportunities in terms of jobs and growth in that. Let's work together on that. Mm-hmm. But let's also then, as the next thing, is make sure that we have a proper deal with the European Union with whom we do half of our trade, and that we're not undermining the Good Friday Agreement, and then we can move on to working with the United States further on other areas where we could increase trade. At the moment, we do 18% of our trade with the United States. We do 48% of our trade with the European Union. We have to kind of keep these things in that sort of perspective.
OK. Now, while I've got you, I'm keen to talk to you about Jeremy Corbyn being suspended from the Labour Party for saying that allegations of anti-Semitism were overstated. Of course, it comes after that report by the Equality and Human Rights watchdog that said that Labour had acted unlawfully. Have you spoken to him since then?
I haven't spoken to Jeremy. I'm probably going to be seeing him today, obviously because it's Remembrance Sunday. But I have not spoken to him directly.
You, of course, were in the shadow cabinet with Jeremy Corbyn.
Yes.
A time when you were all going around, knocking on doors, giving interviews, saying that he should be in number 10. Yes. And now you're saying it's right for him to be suspended from Labour. Do you regret being in the shadow cabinet with him?
Well, the first thing is that I am not expressing an opinion about the disciplinary process in relation to Jeremy, because it has always been my firmly held view that it is not for politicians to make decisions on this front. What we have always been told is that it should be done by the party, or it should be done on an arm's length basis. The EHRC report has also specifically said that politicians should keep out of this and that it should be done in an independent way. So whatever my private views are about this, I'm not going to express them on national television.
OK, but do you regret being in the shadow cabinet, campaigning for Jeremy Corbyn to be Prime Minister, when at the time we knew about allegations of the way Labour was handling anti-Semitism?
So I think that it's quite clear I'm on the record. I was on record at party conference, in the media, and I think that some of these books that have been written about what was going on behind the scenes make it clear that I was saying in private what I was saying in public.
So if you thought that, then why were you staying in the shadow cabinet?
Because I felt that it was a struggle, but that we were going in the right direction. So that, the processes had taken too long to improve, but they were getting better. Mm-hmm. I didn't know the extent of the issues in terms of the interference of Jeremy's office with the disciplinary process. I didn't know the extent of that because I'm not on the NEC.
Okay.
I'm not involved in the background stuff. But I knew that we were making progress. It was a struggle,
okay.
but it was the right place for me to be, was to be there, making sure that we were going in the right direction.
We're at time, but I just want to squeeze one last thought in. We're in coronavirus lockdown.
Yeah.
If you knew your neighbours were breaking the rules, having some people over for dinner, would you report them to police?
No, but I would talk to them about it.
OK, fair enough. Emily Thornberry, thank you very much for being on the programme today. Thank you.